Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Здравствуйте, товарищи. Well, I had the interesting question that I would like to share with you and give the answer. And the question is pretty long, but I would like to read the whole thing before I answer. When you lived in the Soviet Union, were you proud to be a citizen of the Soviet Union? And proud of the leaders and identified heroes of the Republic? And are you proud now about the Soviet Union and their heroes? Many people are proud of a country even when they know it did horrible things like American slavery and genocides and discrimination against the indigenous people, and venerate leaders like George Washington and Reagan even when they knew they did horrible things like slaves and Contras. Not that you were told much about losers' side. I know that feeling too. The way Canada treated its indigenous population was akin to some Soviet gulags in the time of Stalin, and even today there's massive discrimination, inequality, and ecological damage. So we're going to talk today about Soviet pride. Yep, Soviet pride. And it's interesting, it's like a perfect timing when this question arrived, because I was planning to make a video about this interesting moment in my life when I was probably about 10, 11 years old. So that happened around 1981-82 when Leonid Brezhnev was still in power. I had a very interesting conversation with my uncle Misha, the artist. I already made a couple of videos about him, about his struggles to get an apartment in Kiev, about struggles with art. And so we, were like pretty close relatives, I guess, because he was the only brother of my mom. And we both families lived in Kiev pretty close. So we were visiting each other often for the birthdays and other celebrations, or just kind of to come over to hang out. We didn't really have a good relations with my father's side. He had several brothers and sisters live in Kiev, but for some reason we just didn't click. So I want to tell you about that conversation. It was long time ago, 81, 82, so we're talking 30 some years ago. But my memory is funky. Like, I don't remember what happened 2 months ago, but I still got this image of me and uncle walking across the railroad tracks and talking about Soviet Union. So there's the story. So this conversation happened after we got our new apartment. If you watch my channel, you should know that it was pretty much my parents moved 3 times. First, we shared one room in the dorms with another family, so we had 6 people living in one single room. Then we got a little tiny apartment for our own family, and we lived there till like 1980, so about 3-4 years. And then we managed to purchase on like Soviet mortgage style apartment. So we moved to this apartment, and we became like really close distance wise with my uncle. And the way the locations were that you could take a bus, and it's like, so if you picture letter U, so you have to drive all the way the length of letter U, or you can just walk through the industrial area and the railroad tracks. So time-wise, it'll be quicker just to walk to get from our apartment to my uncle's apartment, and which way we did for a long time. We just go and walk for 30 minutes walk instead of spending an hour, switching buses and riding around to get to his place. At that time, so I said, I was probably about 10, 11. I was a young pioneer in school, and you weren't forced to become a pioneer, but it was kind of like you wanted to be, because it's also your stages of your growing up. First, you become Oktyabryonak, young October kid, and you have the special badge. Then they admit you into pioneers when you're in the 3rd, 4th grade. And good students, the ones that had good grades, were becoming pioneers first. So I remember I was so proud. So that was not like being a patriot of your country. It was more like I'm growing up, I'm becoming older, more mature. So now I got upgraded into pioneers. So my family was kind of apolitical, so we never talked about politics at home. My parents were too busy, surviving from day to day, paying bills. I mean, we didn't have a lot of bills, but when we got that apartment with the Soviet-style mortgage, it was pretty heavy to pay every month 50 rubles for income. So they kind of just let me be on my own. And of course, because of the school and newspapers and propaganda on TV and radio, I was quite a hardcore, Soviet patriot being a kid. So we were walking across, as I said, the industrial area and railroad tracks, and somehow this conversation turned into Leonid Brezhnev, our general secretary, leader of the Soviet Union. And I just had a spiel, I had a speech about how great our leader is, how smart he is, and how we're moving towards communism, and we're going to have a bright future. Just spitting out that whole propaganda thing that I learned in school or on TV. I don't know why I was talking like that, just telling my uncle that thing. But suddenly he kind of stopped, looked at me, and he just said things. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember being so shocked because he was just like, "Hey, kiddo, it's all just a bunch of BS. They lied to you." And he just he made me, I couldn't believe my ears, because how people can be so skeptical and so acid about life in Soviet Union. But my uncle went through some hard times and a lot of struggles to get his apartment, so he was really bitter about all the Soviet system. So I remember that, just not what he said, but the shock that he had this whole negative comments about our leader and about our Soviet system. So as I said, I was a Soviet patriot at that time, but I wasn't patriot enough to go and report on him to KGB. That never crossed my mind. During the Stalin regime, it was actually promoted quite a bit that if you're a real, pioneer, real hero, if you see your parents doing something anti-government, you must report to authorities. And there's recordings about, they proudly announced in the newspaper, this little kid noticed his father stealing something from the collective farm. He reported, and his father got sent to Siberia. "Good job, kiddo. You're a real future of this country." So anyway, so this is what happened. My kind of first reaction, meeting someone who told in my face that things are not that rosy and pretty in Soviet Union. But personally, I think I was very patriotic, as I said, because I remember if I would hear during hockey games, they were talking, Russians versus Canadians, and I would always get angry because I say, well, that's not Russians. We're not, those players are not Russians. They're Soviet players. And I consider myself, first of all, Soviet person. I'm being Ukrainian nationality, but I'm a Soviet person. So I think I was really proud. But of course, when you're a little kid, a lot of times you just kind of take it the way it is. You believe adults, because that's how brains works of the little kids. You look at adults, especially your parents, like they are gods. So you just kind of absorb that information and you believe it. And it's one of the reasons I think if, kids that got exposed to religion from early days, they become religious. If they're not, then quite often they just stay atheist and they don't believe in stories about Jesus. So same with me, under influence of propaganda in school and on mass media, I was quite patriotic, but those things started changing, and as I become teenager and kind of started myself experiencing negative things about life in Soviet Union. And I can compare that, picture you live in a zoo, you're an animal, right? Like your little tiger, your little baby lion. So your parents, they understand the cage, they understand the limits that, life is pretty secure. They feed you, but there's no really freedom, and there's a limits, there's a cage. But when you're a little baby, you run around and you think that's how it's supposed to be. You never think there's jungles out there or whatever that you can roam and do whatever you want and enjoy freedom. That's the way you saw the things when you were born, and that's how you accept them. Later on, as you're growing up, you kind of started bumping yourself into these cages and the limitations, having, struggles with bureaucracy. And then, of course, your attitude will start changing most people, when you kind of open your eyes and you see the real picture. So that kind of what happened to me, was that initially I was extremely patriotic, and but then as getting older, I was getting more and more skeptical. And events of Chernobyl and of 1986 did a lot of damage, I would say, to my patriotism, because the way the government was concealing information about radiation, about effects on health, and about what actually happened, you kind of lose trust to government, and if you lose trust, you lose everything with it. And of course, later on, I had quite an ugly situation. So that was probably 1990. So perestroika going on. So we kind of got a little bit borders open, and I had opportunity to go to Germany. I met some Germans who invited me to come and stay with them in Germany. And of course, when you were Soviet Union, you can't just go. You require at that time, in order to get a passport for traveling abroad. So we had two passports, right? I already told you that story. One for inside passport, and a different passport if you travel to the other country. And in order to get that passport, you can't just go and say, hey, I would like to get a passport for traveling overseas. You actually need to have some kind of document. So you need to bring a letter, like, hey, I'm invited to go to Germany to visit friends. I need a passport. So that's the first step. Never mind, it's a second step. In my case, first step, you need to get a special paper permit, like permission from your place of work. Well, that means that they don't mind that you can go across the borders. So, there were a lot of businesses, like the top secret, they maybe developed something like military related. So they had some limits that people, if you work, they call them mailbox. That was the name, почтовый ящик. Like when you drop the mail in the mailbox, you never can take it out. It always goes one way. So the factories or any other organizations that work for military and they had dealing with top secret information, they were called mailboxes. And I happened to work in one of those mailboxes, and I just basically started. So I had no access to any secrets. I was still in training. Basically, I just had access to go in that building, and but I had to get permission from company to get the passport to go to Germany. And the guy who was in charge of those permits, he was a kind of like retired KGB officer, old timer, Soviet geezer. And the guy's like, nope, you can't. And I was like, I'm sorry, I just started working here. I have no access to any secret information. I'm just a trainee. And he's like, I don't care. And this is, I think, what the, what is it called? Camel's back got broken. That's why I really, really became not happy with the whole system, with the whole Soviet Union, with my big Soviet cage. So yeah, I was so excited, I can go and see the Germany, be other country, and it never worked out. And then, of course, when the Soviet Union collapsed, then it became way easier. And then my company closed down, so then I didn't have to get any permissions from anybody to go to the other countries. But that's kind of events like that would definitely affect the person. As I said, it's just when you realize that you live in a cage, then you start hating the cage and you start hating people who run the whole zoo. And of course, we talked already about all the humor, Soviet humor and jokes about Soviet leaders, about Brezhnev, Andropov. It tells you that a lot of people were super sarcastic, because if you really like someone, you don't usually make these jokes about how stupid they are or how they, lazy they are or something like that. But there was so much jokes about Soviet leaders, and they were kind of, you can get in trouble if KGB will get report that you talking that way. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you so much for watching my channels. If you guys got any more questions, please post under this video, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.
And if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new interesting videos about the life in Soviet Union.